I've been asked to come here and and this on Sunday also, but somehow he chooses not to respond to my messages. I'm trying to be as truthful as possible. Right. So he's preaching in the Hinjawadi area, and you must have heard of Evolve, all the programs that happen through the Evolve through the Evolve platform. He's spearheading it, and he has a very good group of brahmacharis and devotees who are helping him. He is also senior brahmacharis at the NVC's temple, takes care of the what entire IT needs there and the huge departments.
Started under your guidance only.
He is the COM member also at the NVCC. We are informed that he agrees to come on a Sunday also. Okay. So let us welcome him by chanting one time the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare.
Sorry? Fine. Hare Krishna. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Jamuna Tiravanachari Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Jamuna Tiravanachari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Radha Madhava Radha Madhava Radhe Jaya Gauranitai 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 Jaya Gauranitai Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Nitai Gaur Haribo, 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 Nitai Gaur Haribo. Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki, Shishi Gaur Nitai ki, Jagadguru Srila Prabhupada ki. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We'll recite together. Narayanam namaskritya naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayam mudirayat nashtaprayeshu bhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati uttama shloke bhakte bhavati nashtaki Krishnaya Vasudevaya Devaki Nandanaya Cha Nandagopakumaraya Govindaye Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna. So we are reading today from Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, 9th chapter, verse number 27. Dana dharman raja dharman moksha dharman vibhagashaha stri dharman bhagavat dharman samasa vyasa yogataha dana dharman raja dharman moksha dharman vibhagashaha Sri Dharman Bhagavad Dharman Smasa Vyasa Yogataha Dana Dharman Raj Dharman Moksha Dharman Vibhagashaha Sri Dharman Bhagavad Dharman Smasa Vyasa Yogataha Dana Dharma Raja Dharma Vasaha Sri Dharma Bhagavad Dharma Smasa Vyasaya Mothers Dana Dharma Raja Dharma Moksha Dharman Vibhagashaha Sri Dharman Bhagavad Dharma Smasa Vyasa you word by word Dana Dharman Raja Dharman Moksha Dharman Vibhagashaha Sri Dharman Bhagavad Dharma Smasa Vyasa Yogataha word by word Dana Dharman the acts of charity Rajadharman, pragmatic activities of the kings. Moksha Dharman, the acts for salvation. Vibhagashaha, by divisions. Stri Dharman, duties of women. Bhagavad Dharman, the acts of the devotees. Smasa, generally. Vyasa, explicitly. Yogataha, by means of. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki. Translation. He then explained by divisions acts of charity, dana dharma, the pragmatic activities of a king, Raj dharma, the activities for salvation, moksha dharma, and then he describes the duties of a woman, stri dharma, and devotees, that is Bhagavad dharma, both briefly and extensively. So this has a little big purport. I'll offer prayers and we'll go through the purport. Simultaneously, we'll have a discussion. Otherwise, if we read it, it'll be difficult to recollect. So we'll go in that way. Om Jnanatirmirandasya ज्ञानाञ्जनाशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टां स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपा कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वापदान्तिकं वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरु श्रीयुतापदकमलं श्रीगुरुं वैष्णवांश श्रीरूपं साग्रजातां सहगणा रघुनाथान्वितं तां सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनासहितं श्रीकृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधाकृष्णपादान् सहगणा ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्तस्वामिनिति नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेषशून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे नमो महावदन्याय कृष्णप्रेमपदायते कृष्णाय कृष्णचैतन्य नामने गौतुसे नमः वाञ्छाकल्पातरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्यैव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः हे कृष्णा करुणा सिन्धु दीनबन्धु जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिकाकान्त राधाकान्त नमोस्तुते तप्त कांचना गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौभक्तवृंद हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे Hare Krishna. So first of all, I'd like to thank His Grace Kanai Thakur Prabhu for inviting. I was quite hesitant and I was kind of making excuses, but our Asha Gopal Prabhu, he is a properly trained voice devotee. Nobody can beat his follow-up. So where is, there is he. So I was thinking, I've ran out of excuses now. There's nothing. Finally, I said, Prabhu, this is too early. I can't come. My whole day will be disturbed. So he said, no problem. You come and stay back here. I said, okay, now I have to surrender. Okay, I'll come. So my hesitancy was because at least all the practicing devotees here, because of their assistance and help only this whole Hinjawadi thing started. Radha Krishna Chandra Prabhu was there, then after that Shri Baldev Prabhu was there. And although I may be leading now, but actually I was assisting them at that point of time. And they probably, things were happening more here than they got busy here. So in that way I was a little hesitant for a child to go and speak in front of his father. So I was like, no, why me? All wonderful devotees are here. It's just life is sometimes busy. I was not getting a chance to visit here. Otherwise, I would have preferred to come and take association than dare to speak. But nonetheless, I have to follow the order. So with that, so the only reason I didn't read the purport to begin with, it's a little long purport considering the time that we have. We'll go through every line of the purport nonetheless. And while doing that, we'll have the discussion. So in this verse, Bhishma Dev is speaking about 5 dharmas asked by Yudhishthira Maharaj. Foremost, it's very interesting and noteworthy to talk about that Yudhishthira Maharaj is asking a person who's on a deathbed, Despite having Srila Vyasadeva, Lord Shri Krishna personally present there, apart from many other great personalities who had come to hear this conversation, yet Yudhishthira Maharaj had to ask questions. If you look through the pages of Mahabharata, one peculiar thing, or very important characteristic of Yudhishthira Maharaj, which is good for us to imbibe, he was, despite being the most learned person, We know the story of how he delivered Bhima, from King Nahusa, who had become the snake, the serpent, by answering perfect questions, and also the Yamraj, who came as an invisible ghost and answering. So, despite being the most intelligent person, he never ever, uh, you know, I would say, would never leave the opportunity of doing a sadhu sangha. The right way of doing sadhu sangha is tadvidi pranipatena pariprashnena sevya. He would always ask. He would always ask questions. And when you read through Mahabharata, at times it feels like he's asking the same question to different people. you know. So here, anyways, he has been put into this kind of bewilderment, similar to what Arjuna was put into a bewilderment right at the beginning of the war. And here, as you know, for in the case of Bhagavad Gita, Lord Shri Krishna wanted Arjuna to become an instrument for the message of Bhagavad Gita to be reinstated, as Krishna says in the 4th chapter, verse number 1. And then in the second verse, how this knowledge had been lost. Evam parampara praptam. It just comes in the disciplic line, but disciplic line was broken, so I am reinstating it through you. And here in this case, Lord Shri Krishna facilitated this whole incident where Yudhishthira Maharaj would have to come down and ask. He could have come and met Bhishma Pitama, glorified Bhishma Pitama. This conversation went for almost a month. It's a big part of Mahabharata when you read. Of course, the authenticity of it is in doubt now. Mahabharata, if it is said, if it is authentic at large, is up to the war. After a war, there are a lot of additions have happened. So how much is a factual thing, how much has been edited is difficult to say. But it's a big, big section of Mahabharata where this conversation goes for a long time. And Srila Prabhupada, just 2-3 verses prior, gives the reason why Yudhishthira Maharaj among everyone has to come and ask Bhishma Pitama. He gives several reasons, saying that first of all, Lord Shri Krishna wanted to glorify his devotee. He wanted Bhishma. Second reason Prabhupada mentions, Lord Shri Krishna wanted to make a point that a pure devotee of the Lord is totally out of bodily consciousness. Even if his body is dilapidated like of Bhishma Pitamaha, extreme case, when Krishna have to set an example, he really sets an extreme examples. So we have no excuse to give in any situation. Bhishma Pitamaha's body was pierced so many times, there was not even a space for anything else. So many arrows. Now that's an extreme situation. So Srila Prabhupada writes in one of the purpose prior to it, that Lord Shri Krishna wanted to establish an example that a pure devotee of the Lord is not perturbed by what goes on to his body. Despite having so much pain to the body, the pure devotee of the Lord is perfect in his consciousness. And we have a perfect example as Srila Prabhupada, who exhibited this. And like that, several reasons are mentioned. So let's come and focus on this, where Prabhupada, through his purport, now going to talk about 5 dharmas, and we'll briefly take a look at each of it, what Prabhupada have described. So very first, Prabhupada talks about Dan dharma. I'll read out the paragraph. I'll just give you a summary of it, what Prabhupada is discussing here. Dan dharma, charity. Why charity is important? Why should we do charity? 4th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Lord Shri Krishna talks about this concept of charity. Different people have different penances and sacrifices to perform. For brahmachari, the charity is of his senses. In other words, the penance and sacrifice of his senses, particularly his hearing. He need to dedicate his hearing, and Prabhupada writes in the purport in 4th chapter, verse number 26, that brahmachari should only hear about Krishna consciousness. And that is what his sacrifice is. So why charity has been emphasized in the scripture so much? Prabhupada gives a very profound example in the paragraph. Prabhupada says, just like the inland rivers are nourished by the sea water through the medium of the clouds, the river gets nourished. And the same river goes and mixes into the sea. So river has borrowed that water from the sea, and it goes back into the sea. In other words, it gives back to the sea. So Srila Prabhupada says, sea is like Krishna. We are receiving everything from Krishna. It is our duty to give back to Krishna. I'll read out the purport. To give charity is one of the householder's main functions, and he should be prepared to give in charity at least 50% of his hard-earned money. Srila Prabhupada was giving a lecture and he was speaking on prana, artha, dhiya, vacha. And Srila Prabhupada said, one should give his prana, dedicate oneself entirely for the purpose of serving the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And then he began to express his gratitude for all his devotees who have actually really, dedicated himself or herself to the mission of Srila Prabhupada. And then Prabhupada said, well, if you cannot give your prana artha, give your artha, give 50%. So there was a little silence. So, right? If you cannot give your 50%, prana artha dhiya, then use your intelligence. The output of intelligence is your position, your status in the society. Utilize that to serve Krishna. And then Prabhupada said, if you cannot use your prana artha dhiya, then at least dedicate your vacha. Which means the best way to dedicate your vacha is to glorify Krishna, glorify Vaishnavas. And that is done through the chanting of the holy names of the Lord. And then Prabhupada paused. Apart from devotees, there are also life members. So Prabhupada said, the Prabhupada thought, the message has not well communicated to the life members. Devotees have understood. Life members are very much nodding on to the last point, vacha. We should give our vacha. So Prabhupada said, however, if you have money, you should give money also. You should not keep money for yourself. And then Prabhupada said, it is seen often many people, retired men, they come to Vrindavan to chant the holy names of the Lord. There's nothing wrong. But what they do, they leave their bank balance and property to their family members and they come empty pocket. Krishna is very intelligent. This is Prabhupada's word, huh? Krishna is very intelligent. He will definitely ask you what you left behind and what you brought here. So, and again, Prabhupada, this was particularly addressed to the life members, so therefore we should also do a charity. His Holiness Badrinath Maharaj talks about how he became a full-time devotee. Long story short, I'll make it very concise. He had been visiting our San Francisco or San Diego, either of the temples, and he was very much impressed. He was not impressed much with our culture and practice, but he saw that, they're all young, intelligent men and women, seems to be happy and everything. So this is after fourth or fifth visit. So the speaker was giving a class, and he made a point that you should give everything to Krishna. And he really pounded on that point repeatedly. So Maharaj says that he looked behind and there were hippies sitting. When he made the point you should give everything to Krishna, they started taking out their clothes. So he said, I was totally confused. He was also hippie. He said, I was totally confused. The temple president come and he said, no, you don't do this. And then he asked that person, what happened? He said, no, actually the speaker said, give up everything for Krishna. So they don't have anything else except for their clothes. So they started taking out their clothes. All right, there was a kirtan, there was prasadam. This is his fourth or fifth visit around. There was kirtan, there was prasadam, everything was wonderful. And what that temple president had done, he would have young kids stand at the exit door with a donation box. So that, kids or the mothers on this particular PR related things. So he said, when I was walking away, I have been already coming for a few times, and then I saw the young boy, holding a donation box. So I thought, okay, I should give something. I've been coming and eating prasadam all this while. So I took out my wallet. Now, Maharaj comes from a very rich family. He took out his wallet and he put some dollar notes there. Young boy, huh? And Maharaj was already impressed by the intelligent philosophy and the devotees, how well they will speak and articulate. As soon as that Maharaj put that money in the donation box, he folded his wallet and kept in his pocket. Immediately the young boy said, Krishna does not see what you give. Krishna sees what you keep behind. So Badrinath Maharaj said, I was so shocked. I said, this little fellow is also so smart. I gave my whole wallet. And the next day I was convinced and I moved into the ashram. So, anyways, let's come back to the charity for grahasthas. A brahmachari or student should perform sacrifices. Householder should give charity, and a person in the retired order or in the renounced order should practice penances and austerities. Those are the general functions of all the ashrams, orders of life on the path of self-realization. In the brahmachari life, the training is sufficiently imparted so that one may understand that the world as a property belongs to the Supreme Lord, the personality of Godhead. No one, therefore, can claim to be the proprietor of anything in the world. Therefore, in the life of a householder, Prabhupada is talking about training to brahmacharis so they understand nothing belongs to them. Therefore, as a brahmachari, we write in care of. When I came for the first time, I was wondering, before the name of a brahmachari, it was ICO. So I thought ICU. I couldn't understand what was that. So I asked one devotee, on the pen, on the dhoti kurta, you name it, anything. Everywhere was ICO and followed by a name. So I asked the devotee, I said, what is this ICU? He said, in care of. So it took me a while to understand why it is in care of. Because it's a very deep-rooted idea. If something I have it in my hand, we become quite attached to it. So that's the point Prabhu is saying. Brahmachari is trained to understand nothing belongs to him, everything belongs to the Lord. So we practice this concept of in care of. Therefore, in the life of a householder, which is a sort of a license for sex enjoyment, one must give in charity for the service of the Lord. Everyone's energy is generated or borrowed from the reservoir of energy of the Lord. And Prabhupada, I had given a beautiful example. Therefore, the resultant actions of such energy must be given to the Lord in the shape of transcendental loving service for Him. And an example follows now. As the river draws water from the sea through the clouds, again go down to the sea, similarly our energy is borrowed from the Supreme Source, the Lord's energy, and it must return to the Lord. That is the perfection of our energy. Bhagavad Gita, 15th chapter, verse number 13 to verse number 15, discusses this concept of how we are entirely dependent on Krishna, or put it other way around, how Krishna provides for our gross body, subtle body, and the spirit. In the 13th verse, 15th chapter, Krishna says, how these planets are fixed in their orbit because of my dharyami aham ojasa, because of my energy. And then Krishna says, how these vegetables, the rasa that they get, is because of my energy. I am the moon which gives the taste. And Srila Prabhupada in the Prabhupada writes, rasatmaka means it makes the vegetables and fruits palatable. So first of all, we are in a fixed position because the planet is in a fixed position. Then we get the food to eat. But how do you digest? 14th verse, Krishna says, I am the fire of digestion. Because of me, you're able to digest. But about the breathing, Krishna says, I am your life air also. So like that, Krishna explains that how he maintains the body. And then in the 15th verse, a very famous verse, Sarvasya chaham, hidi sannivishtam mataha smriti jnanam apohanam cha. Krishna explains how he maintains our subtle body also. I give you the intelligence, I give you the forgetfulness, I give you the remembrance like that. And finally, Vedaischa sarvair aham avedyo vedanta krit vedavid eva chaham. I also nourish your spirit. How? By giving you, availing the Vedic literatures by which you can understand what's your eternal relationship with the Lord. And all in all, we are entirely dependent on Krishna. That is what is mentioned by Prabhupada here. Whatever we have is borrowed from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Lord, therefore, in the Bhagavad Gita, the classic verse that defines Karma Yoga, Prabhupada quotes that, Yat karosi yadasnasi yat juhosi dadasiyat. Translation, whatever we do, whatever we undergo as penance, whatever we sacrifice, whatever we eat, whatever we give in charity must be offered to Him. That is the way of utilizing, is about purifying oneself. When our energy is utilized in that way, our energy is purified from the contamination of material inabilities. And thus we become fit for our original natural life or service to the Lord. More or less, Karma Yoga is being discussed. Yagnarthat karmanot anyatra lokoyam karma bandhanat. Tadhartam karma kanteya mukta sangha samachara. You become liberated. Similar concept is discussed in Isha Upanishad. Ishavasyam idam sarvam. Once you understand everything is controlled by the Lord, then Isha Upanishad says, how you work? Kurvaneveha karmani jijivsikshatam samaha. Evam tvainanyate tosti na karma lipyate nare. That's another definition of Karma Yoga. Once you understand the Lord, or Krishna is the supreme controller, being situated in the consciousness, understanding you're part and parcel of the Lord, continue to perform your work. Jiji visikshatam samaha. Live as long as a century. You can hit a century, live as long. Na karma lipyate nare. And no kind of karma will bind you. That's all in all about Dana Dharma that Srila Prabhupada describes. Coming to Raja Dharma, which is the second paragraph. In essence, Prabhupada talks about how not having a proper understanding of the duties of a king, today's elected personalities or representatives have only become exploitators. They just exploit. That's the large message. We'll take a look at it. Reading the next paragraph. Raj Dharma is a great science, unlike modern diplomacy for political supremacy. The kings were trained systematically to become munificent and not merely be tax collectors. And one of the purpose Prabhupada raises a point. What is the difference between a monarch and a dictator? Prabhupada says monarch is one who is trained. Dictator is one who is not trained. That's the point. They were trained to perform different sacrifices for the prosperity of the subjects. To lead the prajas to the attainment of salvation was a great duty of the king, which means to establish Varnashrama Dharma. Varnashrama Dharma, in other words, also mean a hierarchy. You're establishing hierarchy. Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudra. Hierarchy is an interesting word. The root word is from Greek. And if you look at the root word, it means divine order. Interestingly, hierarchy, which is looked in a very apparently negative way today. So hierarchy, which is being discussed in various scriptures in the form of Varnashram Dharma, in true sense, in its original meaning in English also means a divine order. So what is this divine order? What is this Varnashram Dharma that Prabhupada highlights? That's the duty of a king. That there is a Brahmana, then you have a Kshatriya, then you have a Vaishya, then you have a Shudra. It's like a pyramid. So another concept on it, many times people raise this question about Papa Yoni, Striya, Shudra, Vaishya. There are different understanding, but I'll speak in the context of hierarchy. When it is said Papa Yoni, it is not entirely mean that they're sinful in that context. It means they're in a lower position. Now, being a lower position again is a debatable thing. We think it's a controversial thing. Now, if you look at this hierarchy, pyramid here, if you're in a lower position, what it means, how is this hierarchy of the divine order functions? Brahmanas protect Kshatriyas by giving their guidance. Kshatriya in return protect the praja, which includes Vaishya and Shudra. And Vaishya also protects Shudras. So when you talk about the lower in the order, which means you are the recipient of protection. That's the reason it said, right? Brahmanas, old men, the cows, the women, and the kids, they should not be punished. They should not be killed. They should be protected. However, this order or this divine order becomes exploitative if Brahmanas are on the top of the order. On the top of the order is not Brahmanas. On the top of this pyramid is Krishna. When Brahmanas are guided by the Supreme Personality Godhead, then it is Varnashrama Dharma. When Krishna is not there in your social structure, like what we have today in the society, when the top position is empty, then what happens? Everyone is competing to grab that top position. And what is the understanding when you live in the society? The common understanding is the higher I rise, the more people I would have under me, which I can exploit. And that is how the society today functions. Yes or no? That's the understanding. Why? Because of atheistic structure. Why? Because the top of the pyramid where the Lord has to be sitting, they've taken it off, made an atheistic society. Therefore, Prabhupada writes in the purport again and again, why in atheistic society people can never be happy? Everyone is exploiting everyone else. So here it talked about monarchy, Rajadharma. So earlier, and if you look at the Western civilization or the European society, it was run as theocracy. Theocracy means the priests. The church was instituted for this purpose, to control people, and they were the decision maker. And when the government was run by the pastor, it was called as theocracy or the pope, run by the pope. Then a time came when the Kshatriya class thought, these people are bigger rascal than I am. They are doing more sense gratification, doing sinful activities than I am. Why should I listen to them? That led to the monarchy, which was somewhere around middle of 15th and 16th century in the Eastern Europe, or in the Europe, not Eastern Europe, largely whole of Europe. And then the Kshatriyas came into power, they began to exploit rest of the community. Now, because they are not guided by the trained of Brahmanas, so they began to cause exploitation in the society. Then the Vaishyas thought, why should we get exploited by them? We do the hard work, we pay the taxes, and they exploit. Then it led to the French Revolution somewhere in the middle of the 17th century. And then the Vaishyas came, they exploited. And the Shudras thought, we do all the hard work and they exploit. And then came Lenin. Then came Lenin, 1917, which was Russian Civil War. who threw away, the monarchy regime there. And I believe it was Lenin, right? Who lived only for 2 years after that. 1922, the revolution ended, and then Stalin came into power. And he firmly established the communist rule. And it was from USSR where the communist philosophy went all around the world. And Prabhupada used that example, if you remember. Prabhupada said, how communism has spread all over? They used to distribute pamphlets. I said, similarly, we have to go and do book distribution if we have to establish Varnashram Dharma or Krishna conscious philosophy. So that's the point largely which is discussed in Rajadharma. There's a long discussion on it. Prabhupada says, such people do a lot of taxation and etc., which is mentioned here. So I'm skipping through this whole page where Prabhupada goes in detail because in the first canto, Prabhupada have elaborately discussed on Rajadharma again and again what are the duties of the king. Considering the time, let's go to the next one. Then comes Moksha Dharma. Very, very beautiful paragraph, fantastic paragraph. Prabhupada talks about Moksha Dharma, but largely he says we should give up, what is that? 16th chapter, verse number 23. Trividham narkasedam dvaram nashanam atmana kama lobha tatha. Something, three things. Kama, lobha, and krodha. Kama, krodha, tatha, lobhas. We should give up. That's the focus here. I'll read out this paragraph. As far as salvation is concerned, one has to conquer the principles of lust, anger, unlawful desires, avarice, and bewilderment. And now Prabhupada gives a solution how to deal with it. I'll just read it, we'll not do discussion on this. To get freedom from anger, one should learn how to forgive. This is something which we need to meditate. Very, very profound statements by Prabhupada. To be free from unlawful desires, don't make plans only. You'll not have it. Okay? By spiritual culture, one is able to conquer sleep. By tolerance, one can conquer desires and avarice, which is greed. Disturbances from various diseases can be avoided by regulated diets. By self-control, one can be free from false hopes, and money can be saved by avoiding undesirable association. By practice of yoga, one can control hunger, and worldliness can be avoided by cultivating the knowledge of impermanence. Dizziness can be conquered by rising up, and false arguments can be conquered by factual ascertainment. Talkativeness can be avoided by gravity and silence, and by prowess one can avoid fearfulness. Perfect knowledge can be obtained by self-cultivation. One must be free from lust, avarice, anger, dreaming, etc. to actually attain the path of salvation. And now we come to Stri Dharma, where I would like to spend some time today. As far as the women class are concerned, they are accepted as a power of inspiration for men. Srila Prabhupada writes something very, very beautiful on the subject matter of power of inspiration. I'll not make it controversial, but we are living in the times of woman empowerment. I'm going to read Prabhupada's words, all right? What Prabhupada had to say and what it means. So I'm largely going to keep as it is what Prabhupada had written. I'll just add one or two lines here. Srimad Bhagavatam, 9th canto, chapter number 4, verse number 66. Prabhupada writes, the more she becomes an inspiration to men, the more she has control on the husband. The more she's an inspiration. If a woman is not an inspiration, she cannot actually have a control on a man. And how does a woman become an inspiration? By her submissiveness, by her shyness. These are Prabhupada's words. Another quotation, Srimad Bhagavatam, 4th canto, 26th chapter, verse number 15. Actually, a woman is supposed to be the energy of the man. Historically, in the background of every great man, there is either a mother or a wife. Prabhupada writes, in the background of every great man, not in the forefront, not in the side. Just like an example of a rocket launch. The fire is in the background, not in the front, not in the sides. Otherwise, there cannot be a rocket launch. Srila Prabhupada gives a further insight on this topic in 5th canto, chapter number 1, verse number 29. It's a big one. It's about Priyavrat Maharaj. I'll read the purport actually. I'll go to the purport. Many good points are mentioned. To maintain proper social order, But many times it is asked, what is an inspiration if behind every successful man, Prabhupada writes, power of inspiration for men. So who is an inspiration for sannyasi and a brahmachari? Of course, we know his own is Radhanath Maharaj's example, but just take a look at what Prabhupada writes, okay? To maintain proper social order, and simultaneously, why I'm discussing this is a little bit, again, why Vedic scripture speaks in a certain manner about the role of a man and role of a woman in a society. That's the reason I'm kind of reading this. To maintain proper social order and help the citizens gradually progress towards the goal of life. This is 5th chapter, canto, chapter number 1, verse number 29, purport. The principles of Varnashram Dharma must be accepted. From this verse, Maharaj Priyavrat appears to have been so strict in maintaining the institution of Varnashram Dharma that anyone neglecting it would immediately flee from his presence as soon as the king warned him by fighting or administering light punishment. Indeed, Maharaj Priyavrat would not have to fight for simply because of his strong determination. They dared not disobey the rules and regulations of Varnashram Dharma. It is said that unless human society is regulated by Varnashram Dharma, it is no better than bestial society of cats and dogs. Maharaj Priyavrat therefore strictly maintained Varnashram Dharma by his extraordinary, unparalleled prowess. So point is how Priyavrat Maharaj was able to, perform his duty so rightfully. And the answer is the woman is an inspiration. Oh, hang on. Next paragraph. This is the point. To maintain such a life of strict vigilance, like Priyavrat Maharaj, nobody could break any law in his kingdom. And his kingdom was not your, some 1 acre land. Okay? Priyavrat, actually, you're talking about, I believe, whole Bhumandal, right? He was actually in charge of whole Bhumandal. How he was able to do it? To maintain such a life of strict vigilance, one needs encouragement from his wife. In the Varnashram Dharma system, certain classes, such as the Brahmanas and Sannyasis, do not need encouragement from the opposite sex. Kshatriyas and Grahasthas, however, actually need the encouragement of their wives in order to execute their duties. Indeed, a Grahastha or Kshatriya cannot properly execute, Prabhupada's words, his responsibility without the association of his wife. Prabhupada continues writing further. To execute his duties properly, therefore, Maharaj Priyavrat took advantage of his good wife, who was always expert in pleasing a great husband, and those details are there, which are mentioned like that. So in other words, Stri Dharma, Purush Dharma is not discussed. Many times question is asked, why Stri Dharma only? So elsewhere also Prabhupada writes, I have not included all the quotations, but I'll just give you some examples to make a point, is woman is, as Prabhupada says, woman is considered a source of inspiration or power of inspiration. Let's take a look at their power of mothers in that way. We have many examples in the scriptures. For example, Gandharva, right? Vishwasu in 3rd canto Srimad Bhagavatam. Devahuti was playing on the terrace. She was just a teenager. And seeing that, this Gandharva who was flying in a plane, he fainted. Seeing her beauty, he fainted. Now, I don't think so you would have ever heard a case or would ever come across a case. There was a very smart man running around in the field in Gamcha and somebody fainted. This is just now going to happen. So Prabhupada makes a point in the context. We need to understand the power of the feminine energy. And the point is made is, this feminine energy can act as a representative of Mother Lakshmi, which is called as source of auspiciousness, which is only when it is trained, when the person is trained. If not, the power of feminine energy can act as inauspicious source of energy in the form of Maya Devi, which means continue to bewilder all the living entities. So unless we have a trained mothers, a woman, as Three Dharma is talked about here, until then, stability of society is very difficult. Therefore, in the 1st chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna categorically mentioned about Varna Sankara. Again. So this is something which is very fundamental of Vedic culture. The protection of the kids, the protection of the woman. I'll read out further what Prabhupada says. As such, women are more powerful than men. I just give you an example of Vishwasu, and there are also example of another king that comes. What about Vishwamitra Muni? He just heard the tinkling of the bells of Manka. Right? So that's the point Prabhupada is making. Mighty Julius Caesar was controlled by Cleopatra. Such powerful women are controlled by shyness. Therefore, shyness is important for a woman. Once the control valve is loosened, women can create havoc in society by adultery. Adultery means production of unwanted children, known as Varna Sankara, who disturbs the world. So, in essence, Three Dharma, Prabhupada gives one example of how there was this sweeper, in Calcutta, and even a British man walking on the street would have a respect for her because as soon as a man will walk, she would immediately cover her head. She'll stop, whatever she's doing, she'll cover her head. And Prabhupada makes a point, the shyness is their weapon. And when person is properly trained, then it becomes an auspicious source of energy. Therefore, this discussion on women comes again and again in Srimad Bhagavatam, and that's briefly discussed here as Three Dharma. And finally, Bhagavad Dharma, the last item taught by Bhishma Dev was the process of pleasing the Lord. We are all eternal servants of the Lord. When we forget this essential part of our nature, we are put into material conditions of life. The simple process of pleasing the Lord for the household especially is to install the deity of the Lord at home. We don't have time, but we'll conclude here. The deities of the Lord exist in 5 forms. Chaitanya Charitamrita Adilila mentions that. Paraha, the original form of the Lord in the spiritual world. Vyuha, the immediate expression of the Lord. Vaibhav, Vaibhav refers to the avatars. Leela avatar, Purusha avatar, Gurna avatar, Manvantra avatar, Shaktivesh avatar, and Yoga avatar. There's 6 varieties of avatars. So, Para, Vyuha, Vaibhav, and then, what is that? Paramatma. What is that word? Sanskrit word. And then finally is Archa Vigraha. Archa Vigraha. And Prabhupada writes, when talking about this, Archa Vigraha is visible to us. We don't have access to the Para, Vyuha, Vaibhav. Antaryami. The 4th one is Antar. We don't have access. Therefore, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur in Jaiva Dharma writes categorically that for a neophyte devotee, it is very essential to engage in deity worship. And then he made a point. In fact, for anyone, if he wants to establish a relationship with the Supreme Personality Godhead, deity worship is must. So those religions who say deity worship is idol worship should be abolished, actually they can never ever connect to the Lord. Because unless you serve the person, how can you develop love of Godhead? So Prabhupada here is talking about for Grahasthas, deity worship is very important. By concentrating on the deity, one may progressively go on with the daily routine work. Worshipping the deity at home, serving the devotee, the Srimad Bhagavatam, residing in a holy place and chanting the holy names of the Lord. The 5 of the most important lives Rupa Goswami talks about in Act of Devotion are all inexpensive items by which one can please the Lord. Thus the subject matter was explained by the grandfather to his grandchildren. I mean, it's a big discussion in Mahabharata, which is in a single verse we find here when this 5 dharmas are discussed. So here, Sutta Goswami just, as a passing, what happened? But there's a huge discussion that comes in Mahabharata. So to conclude with, here, upon being asked by Yudhishthira Maharaj, Bhishma Pitama speaks about 5 dharmas. Dana dharma, everything is borrowed from Krishna. Therefore, we should serve him. And second point was purification. Second was Dana dharma and then the Raj dharma. Raj dharma can only be executed properly when we understand Varnashram dharma, when we understand hierarchy. And on the top of the hierarchy, when Krishna is there, only then all your dharmas can be followed. Third, moksha dharma. Prabhupada said many things so that we can reread it. Fundamental was we should give up lust, anger, and greed. And then Three Dharma, we briefly discussed about the power of inspiration. What does that statement mean, power of inspiration? Their energy is far greater than the men. And when a woman acts as a power of inspiration, then actually she has a control on the men. And then it is how auspiciousness spreads. And finally, Bhagavad Dharma, and Prabhupada made a point for Bhagavad Dharma, particularly for congregation as such, Prabhupada here, that we should engage in deity worship. And finally, Prabhupada concludes with association of sadhus, reading of Vedic literatures, chanting of the holy names of the Lord, deity worship, and residing in a holy place. Like this, Bhishma Pitamaha, as Srila Prabhupada explained these 5 dharmas to Yudhishthira Maharaj. Hare Krishna. We conclude here for today. Thank you all for your kind attention. Shrimad Bhagavatam ki, Jagadguru Srila Prabhupada ki. And kindly forgive me if I said something inappropriate. I'm a student, I'm learning. Hare Krishna. Anything, Prabhuji?